Welcome to chapter 10 of the book of First Chronicles. We are past the names. Philistines kill Saul and his son. The Philistines, Alophili. Other places, it calls them the Philistia. Phi is a Philistia, which is a transliteration into Philistine. Alophili means alo is other, phili tribes, but it's generally they call them the Philistines in history, as far as the Bible goes. They waged war, a polemison, the verbal form of polemos, war. They waged war against Israel, and every man of Israel fled from the face of the Philistines and fell slain upon Mount Gilboa. Traumatia, you can add that to your English derivatives book, traumatize, derivative, in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines pursued after Saul and after his sons. And the Philistines struck Jonathan, and Abinadab, and Melchizedek, sons of Saul. And the battle pressed against Saul, and the bowmen found him with the bows, and he was in miseries and suffering pain from the bows he shot. And Saul said to the one carrying his weapons, "Unsheathe your sword, your broadsword, and stab me with it, lest at any time these uncircumcised come and mock me." But the one carrying his weapons would not, for he feared exceedingly. And Saul took the broadsword and fell upon it. And the one carrying his weapons beheld that Saul died, and he fell also himself upon his broadsword and died. Now, I was looking, and he committed suicide. Because of the pain and his suffering. I thought it would be interesting to go through some things that I have observed about suicide. Suicide, in many ways, is playing God. God decides when we are going to be born, and God, I think, decides when and how we're going to die. He knows. Now, it's not whether it's right or wrong, as far as I can see, but where you're going to go afterwards. If it doesn't really matter if it's right or wrong, if you are not walking with the Lord, then and you commit suicide, then you're going to go to Hades, which is worse than where you're at right now, because it'll be eternal, not just a short period of time. And we see this with the people in Hades, like the rich man with Lazarus. The rich man could see Lazarus and ask that he would come and put some water on his tongue in the place that he was at. It was so hot. Talks about outer darkness and flames and all sorts of things in the Bible. We're not really going into what Hades is, but let's say it's the worst case scenario in the world that never ends. I can't imagine how bad it's going to be, and it's important for people to understand that so that they would have a fear of wanting to go there, or not wanting to go there, of going there. A lot of people would say, well, it doesn't exist, so they ignore Hades and live the life the way they want. But there's there's also a differentiation between being in a condition that you will die, or being in a condition that you want to die. You can be in a condition that you're going to die in certain places, such as in the Second World War, we had the Banzai attack by the Japanese soldiers. They knew they were going to die. and they would say bonsai, and the Americans picked that up, and that meant long live the emperor. And then also the kamikazes, the airplanes in the Second World War that dived into the ships, and kamikaze means a divine wind, and they knew that they were going to die. People in war know the possibility of them dying, of course, but then sometimes they know they are going to die because there's just no way out. But then there's also the case of you being in a condition that you want to die, not that you're going to die. You may or you may not, but you want to get away from the condition that you're in right now, or at this time. In the Bible, they have 7 examples, or not 7 places where they consider people having committed suicide. First one was Avimelech in Judges, where he was attacking a town with a wall, and a woman threw a millstone and it hit him in the head and cracked it open, and he was going to die. So he had his man, just like Saul did, stab him, which they did, and he died but his reason for wanting to get away was he didn't want it known that a woman killed him in battle. So his pride was there, but yet he was going to die. So this would be the one where you will die. The next one was in Judges also, and that was in Judges 16:30. The first one, Abimelech, was Judges 9:54. Samson was captured after having his head shaved. Bathsheba taken prisoner working in the millstone, and then he went into an arena. They wanted to play with him. They blinded him, and they wanted to torture him in front of all these thousands of people. And Samson asked the man where the pillars that were holding up the building were located to put him there, and he pressed against them, and the building caved in. And it says that more people died that way than they did by being killed by Samson in his life. So Samson, they consider that a suicide, but I don't really consider that a suicide. If you're doing something, it's more of like in warfare. If you're going to do something and there's a chance you could get killed and you are killed, that's not really suicide. So I don't agree with the 7. I would knock out that one. I would say it was only 6. Then here we have Saul and his right-hand man. Well, they are also in war. Saul, but he hadn't died yet. He was in pain. So that is sort of on the borderline. And his right-hand man, I don't know why he had a respect for Saul. Maybe he was afraid of being captured. It doesn't really say, but he committed suicide. The next place is in 2 Samuel 17:23. We have Ahithophel. He was a general that was with Absalom when Absalom rebelled against David, his father, came into Jerusalem, and David sent his general back and told him to do whatever he can to damage his son Absalom and what was going on. And I can't think of his name, but Ahithophel was a very shrewd man, and he told Jeroboam that they should go after David right away, where this other man said no, they should wait. And he's doing that, give David time to escape. Well, afterwards, Ahithophel realized that he was not being listened to, so he went home and killed himself. Now, that is suicide because of either shame and whatever was going through him. The next suicide was King Zimri of Israel, who was attacked by Omri, a general, revolting against Zimri, and Omri came into the town, conquered it. Zimri knew that he was going to die, and Zimri went into his house and went into a room and set fire on his house, burned the house down over him, and he died. So Zimri, for whatever reason, getting away and so forth, or afraid of being tortured, whatever, he killed himself. The last place in the Bible that I can see that somebody committed suicide was Judas Iscariot, and he felt shame or guilt and over what he did, denying the Lord and delivering him up to the Romans, and he committed suicide. And this is in Matthew 27:5. Zimri was in 1 Kings 16:18, and Ahithophel, 2 Samuel 17:23. Now, reasons for people committing suicide. There's been all sorts of things. There's been group suicides where we had a group called Heaven's Gate. Oh, I don't know, it was 20 or 30 years ago in the United States. It was a cult, and they believed in something to do with Hale-Bopp comet, that they would be taken, and so 39 of them committed suicide down in San Diego. Then I mentioned the Bonsai Kamikazes, large groups of people that committed suicide. And then in Israel, a place called Masada by the Dead Sea, we have a group of Jewish people who went up into the hills into a fortress called Masada that Herod had built, and were trying to get away from the Romans and held out as long as they could. And finally, the Romans were going to capture the fortress. And so 960 Jewish people, soldiers and so forth, jumped off of a cliff, committed suicide. And that is in a group suicide where people get together and decide to do it. Now, is it right or is it wrong? I'm not really the judge. I'm just bringing out things that I see that gets me thinking about the whole subject of suicide. Some people get very depressed in life. They can be in some type of a bad situation, like Hagar, with her being mistreated by Sarah, and she ran into the desert and was going to die. Basically, a sort of suicide, going out there knowing you're going to die. But the Lord stepped in and she didn't. And then I had a friend of mine, a close friend, whose mother was mistreated by an alcoholic husband, and she couldn't take it any longer. And I heard about it, her going into a park, and I think she shot herself. She was depressed with life because of a bad situation. Some people have a terminal illness, and the terminal illness, they know they're going to die, and they can be in a lot of pain, or they can be depressed thinking they're going to die. And if they don't know the Lord, then they commit suicide. But unfortunately for them, they are going to face a worst-case situation by going to Adis. Then pain is another reason. People that I know that are in a tremendous amount of pain. I've been in a lot of pain. I had appendicitis once, and I thought if I had a gun, I'd shoot myself because it was so terrible. I can understand that. And it's hard to deal with. And some people won't. They'll take their lives. But again, afterwards, now if you're a believer and you have all this type of pain and you want to get away from the pain, that's a hard one. And that would be a difficult situation. Some people get depressed and want to commit suicide because, especially in the Bible, we mentioned they were going into exile. You're being pushed out of your home. You're taken captive. You're going to prison or a concentration camp like the Jews in the Second World War. And they would commit suicide. Some of them would. So that is another, but again, are you going to a worst-case scenario? Other people have committed suicide over losing their wealth. during the Great Depression of the 30s, 20s and the 30s, 1920s and the 30s. A lot of people jumped off of buildings because they lost all of their money in the stock market. And it became a known fact that people would quote a lot about the suicides that people did. I also thinks about the 9/11 or something. If you're in a burning building and you know you're going to be burnt up and you jump out and you die, well, that's suicide, but you're not trying to you're just trying to get it over quickly rather than postponing the inevitable. Other people have committed suicide over losing a game. Very competitive people, and they lose. They can't stand the loss, and they'll commit suicide. Others I've heard about being shamed. I heard a young girl that did something that, to me it was, no big deal. A lot of people, but teenagers can be very sensitive, and a girl, and so she was being ridiculed by her friends, and to get away from it, she committed suicide. And I know a man whose daughter committed suicide, something like that, or maybe over her looks, being made fun of, that she doesn't look right. I just read about this young girl who was Miss Teen USA, 10 years ago, and when she gave her speech, it was kind of a clumsy speech that she gave and didn't make a whole lot of sense. She was very beautiful, and they, made fun of her as being the beautiful, dumb blonde. And she said after that, she was thinking about committing suicide. But so she doesn't know the Lord, but she didn't, which is good. Some people commit suicide over guilt. They have done something in their life that is very terrible, and they can't get away from the guilt. But they want to alleviate that guilt, and they're constantly maybe dreaming about it. It's popping up in their mind, and they just can't stand it, and they want to get away from that, and so they will commit suicide. Others can commit suicide over a death of a member of a family, and it tears them up so much, a wife or a son or a daughter, that they don't want to live any longer without the spouse. And especially if they're older, they're used to each other, and they've lived for 20, 30 years, marriage, and one dies, the other one might loses will to live. Sometimes they might commit suicide. Other one is a depression. Person can be very depressed with no reason to live, and is always depressed and feeling bad about everything, and kind of gives up. And that person, some of these people will commit suicide. Another suicide is I experienced with a friend that I knew was a Jewish. He was a composer, and he was a tennis teacher for a while, and then he also put together this 1 mile long mural on the Holocaust, and he did what they call I forgot the name of the music, but it's like woo, with a real eerie kind of science fiction type of a movie, and everything he did, nothing happened. He never became. Maybe he wanted to be famous, and he never couldn't get anything that he wanted, and so he didn't get to his expectations, gave up, and shot himself in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Harley Gaber, was a good friend of mine. Then, for people that are feeling suicidal for different reasons, I was thinking, well, what will help, rather than just laying out a format here of all kinds of people and reasons why they are. Well, what can we do about it? What can they do about it? And I put down some things that hopefully the Lord put them in my psyche, and I thought about it. And one of the first things was to realize that in life we're being tested, and God tests. And a lot of the testing is not pleasant. We go through pain. We go through suffering. We go through death. We go through all sorts of things that are terrible you want to get away from. All the things above that I mentioned. So you want to get away. But if you don't know the Lord, then you will get away or try to get away from it. But if you know the Lord, then just realize that whatever you're going through is a test. Now, God, for whatever reason, does test people. This is over and over again in the Bible. And Jesus was tested in going to the cross, and today is Resurrection Sunday, 2021, and rose from the dead. We are going to rise from the dead. Jesus was tortured terribly. I can't imagine going through all the pain and suffering that he did, but yet he did, and he was resurrected. So, knowing that the resurrection, if you're a believer, is in front of you, and I don't believe that God will allow a person to be tested. It says he won't allow anybody to be tested beyond what they are capable of enduring. So then, the next thing is, once you know that you're being tested, what did Jesus pray when the disciples said, Lord, teach us how to pray? Lead us not into the test. It's not temptation. That's a King James word. Test, pirazo, it's the same, whether it's good or bad. The devil tests us for us to fail. Tested Jesus. God allows testing to happen, allows Satan to test. And so praying to God, as Jesus said, to pray to God that we wouldn't go through the test. That is another alleviation of the symptoms of the wanting to commit suicide. Then have others pray for you, and as the Bible, Word of God says, have the elders of the church come and anoint you with oil. If you're sick and going through any type of pain. If you're not doing any of these things, well, they're missing a lot of teachings of the Word of God, which is the next thing I was going to say, is to read the Word of God. And when you read the Word of God and you see all the things that people have gone through, it makes you, or gives you the feeling that you're not alone. Other people have went through these things and they've made it, or if they didn't make it, then they've went with the Lord and so forth, that, you know, I can get through this with the Lord's help. And so reading the Word of God will show us something that we should be using the Word of God. Then, I believe going to a uplifting church, being around uplifting people, not going to a church that's very depressing. You don't want to do that. You want to go someplace where people are lifting their hands up to the Lord and praising Him and looking forward to the next day. Find a church that's spiritually alive, not one that's spiritually dead, that all they do is go through a rote words that don't mean a whole lot. It may mean something, but liturgy and so forth. Then eliminate the things that are downers in your life when you're having these problems. The downers in life can be the news. You can sit there and watch the news all the time, and if I sat and watched the news, I get very depressed because things aren't going well, which they're not right now, and I was going through other problems. It does not help to go and watch the news or any type of communication with bad things. Even sports can be a downer if your team loses and you get all bummed out. So get away from things that can cause you to be in a downer, basically. And another thing is medical treatment. God has allowed medicine to have a lot of good things. I take ibuprofen for my left hip, and I do it, pain goes away. It helps a lot. There are things that you can, the medical field can help. The whole medical field is not something that I ignore and just believe that only my belief and faith in the Lord is going to heal me. I believe that God uses the healing. If you're a Christian, God uses the healing of other people that have the ability to do things that will help you. If you have a bad tooth, you have a toothache, and you have some decay in it, you go to a dentist. Now I can't sit there and wish, if I had enough faith, my cavity would fill itself. See, I don't believe that. I believe there are certain things in medicine that aren't bad. I believe psychotic drugs and so forth. Those are all the things that I can think of. There are issues about also that are close to the subject of suicide. And one of the issues is having insurance. Is insurance, does that show that you have a lack of faith? Or having a final directive to not put you on life support. Is that committing suicide? If you are getting an automobile accident and you go inside and they have to put you on life support to keep you going, but you have a final directive and you say, I don't want to be on the life support, are you committing suicide? I'm not the judge. I have my own opinion, but I'm going to kind of hold back on that. And the next issue that I see is also euthanasia. Euthanasia is basically the government saying it's okay to put a person to death. And again, the government is playing God. If a person is not believing in the Lord or any of these things, then they could very well take that way out. So these are all thoughts that came to me on this subject. Continuing, afterwards, and Saul died, and his 3 sons, and all his house died in one accord. Now, during this time, David was attacking the southern part of Judah below Philistia and gaining all sorts of wealth, goods, and sending his captured things that he took from all the enemies, sending them all through Israel and making friends with a lot of people, giving them animals and goods and foods and so forth. But the war was going on without him. He was not invited by the Philistines to join, even though he was friends and working with the king of, I forgot, Gath, one of the cities. And so it says, and every man of Israel in the valley beheld that Israel fled, and that Saul and his died and his sons, and they left their cities and fled. And the Philistines came and dwelt in them, so most of Judah fell. And it came to pass in the next day, the Philistines came to despoil the slain, and they found Saul and his sons having fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they stripped him and carried away his Kephalim, head, cephalic, it's a derivative, and his weapons. And the Philistines sent to the land round about to announce good news. Evangelisaste, the verb for evangelize, to announce good news in the houses of their eidolon, idols, and to their people. And they put his weapons in the house of their God, and his head they pinned in the house of Dagon, their god. And all the ones dwelling in Yavis, Galaad, Jabesh Gilead, heard all what the Philistines did to Saul and to his sons and to Israel. And every mighty man rose up from out of Gilead, which was towards the east of the Jordan. And they came and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons and brought them into Yavis, Jabesh, and entombed their osteoporosis, and has to do with the bone, a porosis. That's what I have in my hip. Under the oak of Javish, and fasted 7 days. And Saul died in his lawless deeds, which he acted against the Lord. Now, see, it doesn't say here that God was angry at him because he committed suicide, and that was a sin, which some people would, they come against suicide as a sin, but he died for his lawless deeds, which he acted lawlessly against the Lord, against the word of the Lord, for he did not keep it, and because he asked to inquire by the one who delivers oracles. So if you're not walking with the Lord, that's the problem that you have with God, not that you committed suicide. It's irrelevant. What matters is your walk with the Lord. Now, talking about he inquired of the one who delivers oracles is the witch of Endor. And let's see, where was that at? I'll see if I can find it. Yes, that's in 1 Samuel 28, 3-25. And Saul was worried right here before he went to war with the Philistines, whether he would succeed or not. And he told his right-hand man, well, let's go find out from a soothsayer, somebody that knows what's going on in the future, so forth. And the man said, well, it's against the law. We kill them all. And so Saul disguised himself, went into the witch of Endor, and had her call up Samuel to find out from Samuel, who was not very happy, having had to come back, and he'd told Saul that he was going to die and everything, all the bad things, and Israel was going to lose the war. So this is why God is against Saul, because of these things. And Saul inquired not in the Lord, and God, killed him, Saul. See, now here's all the he, and him. You're going to try to figure out who's who. If you didn't know which one was doing what, you might be confused. Might be confused even if you did know. But he killed him, and he turned the kingdom, that is God, to David, the son of Jesse, who we will go into next and find out about David in the 11th chapter of the book of 1 Chronicles, which I hope you'll continue with us. Now it's getting interested with the things of David. Hope to see you in the next video seminar. Until then, God bless.